In a museum display case, there sits a small, jagged piece of clay. It doesn't look like much. It's not gold, it's not a jewel, but this piece of dried mud contains the final desperate scream of a dying world. It was found in the ruins of a city called Ugarit, located in modern-day Syria. The archaeologists who found it realized something chilling. The tablet had been found inside a kiln. It had been written, thrown into the fire to bake, and never retrieved. But why? Because the person writing it didn't survive the afternoon. The message reads, "My father, behold, the enemy's ships came, my cities were burned, and they did evil things in my country." The country is abandoned to itself. This isn't just the story of one city falling. This is the story of how the first global economy of civilization as complex and interconnected as our own vanished into thin air, plunging humanity into a dark age that lasted 300 years. To understand the horror of the collapse, we first have to understand the paradise that preceded it. Picture the world around 1200 BC. This was the Late Bronze Age. It was a time of superpowers. You had the mighty Egyptians in the south, with their towering pyramids and god kings. You had the warrior Hittites in the north, masters of Anatolia. And in Greece, you had the wealthy Mycenaeans, the people who would later inspire the legends of the Trojan War. But sitting right in the middle, at the crossroads of this vibrant world, was the city of Ugarit. Ugarit was the Singapore or the New York City of the ancient world. It was an absolute cosmopolis. If you walked its streets, you'd hear a dozen different languages. You'd smell exotic perfumes from Egypt and see precious lapis lazuli that had traveled all the way from Afghanistan. This was a world of just-in-time delivery, 3,000 years before the term was invented. Bronze, the metal that powered their armies and built their cities, required two key ingredients, tin and copper. But here's the catch: these metals rarely exist in the same place. Tin had to be imported, sometimes from as far away as modern-day England. Copper came from Cyprus. To survive and thrive, they had to trade. And so they built a globalized system, a complex web of connections linking the great empires together. Kings called each other brother. They exchanged lavish gifts, arranged political marriages, and sent letters back and forth. We've found these letters. They're amazing. They complain about late shipments of grain, they ask to borrow a doctor, and they negotiate bride prices. It all felt so permanent. It felt unsinkable. But then, around 1180 BC, the letters changed. The friendly, bureaucratic tone shifted to panic. There were whispers of a new threat. Not a disciplined army from a rival nation, but something else entirely. A phantom force rising from the ocean. The Egyptians gave them a name that echoes with dread: the Sea Peoples. The year is 1177 BC. The king of Ugarit, a young man named Amurapi, is inexperienced. And worse, he is alone. His most powerful allies, the Hittites, were already fighting for their own survival against enemies on their northern borders. In a gesture of loyalty, Amurapi has sent his own powerful fleet and army to help them, leaving Ugarit's harbor and its countryside completely defenseless. It was a fatal mistake. The attack doesn't come like a formal declaration of war. It comes like a swarm of locusts, a tidal wave of destruction. The Sea Peoples, a mysterious confederation of raiders and migrants whose exact origins are still debated, don't just want to conquer, they want to consume. They burn what they can't carry. Imagine the pure chaos in the streets of the port city. This is a city of merchants and scribes, not professional warriors. The city guard is overwhelmed in minutes. The archives tell a story of sheer desperation. As the invasion began, the king wrote frantic letters to neighboring kingdoms, pleading for aid that would never arrive. One letter, found in the excavations, says simply, 7 ships of the enemy have been seen at sea. 7 ships were enough to seal their fate. The event wasn't a siege that lasted for months. It was a massacre that lasted for hours. The invaders swept through the lower city, torching the warehouses filled with precious grain, wine, and olive oil. The heat from the inferno was so intense that archaeologists today find stone walls that have been vitrified literally turned into glass by the ferocity of the blaze. And in the middle of this hellscape, a single, anonymous scribe runs to the palace archives. Perhaps it's his duty. Perhaps it's a final act of defiance. He grabs a piece of wet clay and, with trembling hands, he scratches out his final report. The one that begins, "My father, behold, the enemy's ships came." He knows he won't survive. He knows the city is lost. His only hope is that the story itself might live on. So, he throws the tablet into the kiln, the oven used to bake and preserve clay documents, hoping someone, someday, will find it and read it. He turns to run. But the roof collapses in flames. The city of Ugarit, a beacon of culture and trade for nearly 1,000 years, dies in a single night. And it wasn't just Ugarit. What happened that night was part of a terrifying domino effect. As refugees fled one falling city, they swarmed into the next, putting unbearable strain on its resources and spreading panic. The intricate supply chains that held the world together shattered. Without tin from the east, there was no bronze. Without bronze, the armies couldn't field new weapons, and the farmers couldn't forge new plows. Famine followed the fire. Within a single generation, a period of about 50 years, nearly every major city between Greece and Gaza was burned to the ground. The Hittite Empire vanished from history. The Mycenaean palaces were abandoned. Even the mighty Egyptian Empire was brought to its knees, surviving only by the skin of its teeth. The silence that followed was deafening. We call this period the Greek Dark Ages. The collapse was so total, so complete, that the survivors in many regions actually forgot how to write. Think about that. A skill as fundamental as literacy was lost. The complex linear B script used by the Mycenaeans vanished completely. For the next 300 years, history wasn't written down, it became oral. The epic stories of a lost golden age of heroes like Achilles and Hector, and glorious cities like Troy were passed down as legends around campfires, because no one had the ability to record them. Ugarit was never rebuilt. It was buried under layers of dirt and sand, its very location forgotten by humanity. It became just another tale of a featureless mound of earth until a Syrian peasant, plowing his field in 1928, violently struck a stone with his plow. That stone turned out to be the roof of a tomb, and that tomb was the gateway back into the grave of a lost empire. When the archaeologists began digging, they didn't just find statues and gold. They found the city's archives. They found those final, frantic letters. They found the receipts and diplomatic cables of a civilization trying to buy time that it simply did not have. For a long time, historians searched for a single culprit to explain this catastrophe. Was it the sea peoples? Was it a series of massive earthquakes? Was it a prolonged drought and climate change? The modern consensus is terrifyingly simple. It was everything, all at once. It was a systems collapse. The Bronze Age civilizations were so deeply interconnected, so optimized for efficiency, that their interconnectedness became their greatest vulnerability. A drought in one region caused a famine, which triggered mass migrations of desperate people to sea peoples, which in turn led to piracy and war. The wars cut the trade routes, which caused the entire economic system to seize up and collapse. It was the perfect storm. Ugarit serves as a ghost from the past, a warning across 3 millennia. They believed their globalized world was too big to fail. They thought their walls were high enough, and their treaties were strong enough to withstand any shock. But history shows us that civilization is an incredibly fragile thing. It takes centuries to build, but as the nameless scribe of Ugarit showed us, it can vanish in a single afternoon. The baked clay tablet that he wrote survives to this day, and it's currently housed in the National Museum of Damascus. So, the next time you hear about supply chain disruptions, climate instability, or geopolitical tensions, remember the forgotten city. Remember the last message sent on the day the world ended. Thanks for watching.